Hey, everybody. So glad y'all are here. We've got a few folks on Zoom. So glad y'all are here too. And folks who will watch later at other times. Really, thanks for being part of tonight. So, guys, you know what tonight's about. Tonight is about dating and marriage, okay? So we're focusing tonight on important, relevant, real topics. Because we believe that God has things to say to us about them through His Word, through experiences of others who have been through things. And so I know, like, even in this room and those watching, you're coming from different places, okay? So whether that's single, dating, engaged, married, and that's great. Like, wherever you are, that's great, because that's where God has you, okay? And so I just want to take a second, like, as we start our conversation, to just center us on Jesus, like that first song we sang. Tonight is about Jesus. So marriage is about Jesus. Ephesians 5 teaches us that marriage is actually a picture of the gospel and the covenant love between Christ and the church, okay? And so that means that dating, which leads to marriage, is about the gospel too. And it means that our search for marriage is about the gospel. And it means that even our singleness is about the gospel, okay? And so I just want to start there. And throughout our conversation, like, we're going to talk about a lot of different things, hopefully, some practical things, and hopefully some spiritual things. But we want to stay rooted there, okay? So wherever you're at, if you're sitting there and you're single, don't think that this is irrelevant to you. This is really important for you, actually. And also, singleness is not a curse, just so you know that. So we're going to be talking, we're going to be focused. We've got 3 married couples sitting here with us right now. So obviously, we're going to talk a lot about marriage and dating, okay? But even if you long for that, your singleness, even if it's only for a season or if it's forever, is not a curse. Singleness is a gift in the same way that marriage is, to be used for your good and for God's glory, okay? So this is not irrelevant for anyone who's here tonight or watching, okay? So I just want to make sure you know that. I think you probably know that if you're here or if you're watching. You don't think it's irrelevant, but I want to make sure that you get that, why this is so important for all of us wherever we are, okay? And why ultimately it all points to Jesus, okay? So I hope that you leave tonight with hopefully some, like, practical wisdom, but even more than that, like, I hope you leave with a greater appreciation for Jesus and a desire to seek Him and know Him and love Him more. Cool? Y'all with me? Okay, great. So, hey, I'm done, okay? We're gonna introduce, this is our panel, okay? They've given their night to be with us and share from their hearts and experiences. So let's go around really quick. Let's start with each person. Let's go around and give a super quick bio of just kind of who you are, what you do, maybe how you got here, okay? You can share anything you want, maybe 30 seconds to a minute. Is that cool? Okay, let's start with TJ, since you've already sang for us. We've already heard your voice.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm TJ Welter, so most of you might have seen me around. I'm actually from Oklahoma originally. I moved here in 2015 to do Downline. So did Downline that year and then stayed in Memphis ever since. 28 years old. We've been married for 2.5 years now. And I work at FedEx in IT as like a project manager over there. And we have a dog named Rory. And I think that's
perfect.
Great job. Well, I'm Rachel Welter. I am from Memphis, Tennessee. I left briefly for college. I went to the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. Go Vols. Anyone? Okay. Sorry.
No, crickets.
I thought I'd try.
Crickets everywhere.
I got a Bachelor's of Science in nursing from there, moved back to Memphis, was a nurse for 6 years, and then have just in the past 1.5 years started practicing as a counselor at a private practice here in Memphis called Cardia Collective. I'm also 28. I also love Rory, our Cocker Spaniel. That's it.
Yeah. Great, thanks.
Hey, I'm Anna Evans. I was about to introduce Matthew, but he's about to introduce himself, so. I'm Anna Evans. I'm from Memphis also. Went to Mississippi State for college. Go Dogs. I'm relying on you, at least Zoom people. Go Dogs. Okay. Went to Mississippi State for college, then came back here for physical therapy school, and now I'm a physical therapist, work in the pelvic floor specialty. So if you want to know what pelvic floor physical therapy is, hit me up. Not many people know about it. We've been married almost 3 years, and that's about it.
So I'm Matthew Evans. I am originally from a small town called Forest, Mississippi. No one knows where it is. But I went to Mississippi State also, and this is where I met my great wife, Anna, and moved to Memphis because she got accepted into PT school, so looked for jobs up here. And right now I'm a engineer at a company called Diversified Conveyors. So yeah, I'm just loving it.
Perfect. Thanks.
Hey everyone, my name is Micah Roeder. I grew up outside of Memphis on the Arkansas side, so go Hogs. Really small town. Went to college at Union University up the road in Jackson, Tennessee. I really loved that experience. Kind of went all around the world and then the U.S. for a little while, and then ended up back here in Memphis about 2 years ago. Joined ICC then, and then Carrie and I got married about 7 months ago, so it's been really great.
All right. I'm Carrie, legally still Lieblong, but will eventually be Roeder. And I have been in Memphis for 4 years. I'm a physical therapist as well. Whoop, whoop. At Baptist Memorial Hospital. I work in the heart transplant unit there. And I'm now married to Micah. And we got married during COVID. Woo!
Perfect. Thanks, everybody. So kind of similar, but we're going to do same thing, but one of you or, as a team, share a brief story of, some of you already mentioned it, but meeting, dating, marriage. Just kind of timeline, just sort of how did you get married, okay? Tell us that, just in a minute or two. Cool? Is that possible?
She handed me the mic, so I don't know if that's possible. Briefly, we met at our old church in 16. Rachel hated me. I thought we were neutral acquaintances, and didn't know. And we started dating the summer of 2017, that June. And that's when she told me she originally hated me, but now she doesn't, so that was good news.
That's hope, that gives hope.
Yeah.
First impressions aren't everything.
Yeah, first impressions. That's true.
Thankfully. So we dated for 6 months, got engaged that December. We're engaged for 6 months, and then got married the next June. So 1 year from when we started dating to marriage.
1 year from hate to marriage.
Yeah.
That's a quick turn. I mean, that's
Right.
Yeah. Nothing is impossible with God.
Hey,
Right.
He'll move mountains.
Yeah, that's right.
That's what
Okay.
I'm saying.
Cool.
Yeah. Anything?
Great story.
No.
Okay.
Really good story. Thanks, guys.
So we met on Halloween night, actually, in 2014 at Mississippi State. And
When we met, Matthew had a cutoff shirt on. His Halloween costume was like a cutoff shirt, so drew me in.
This is good. Yeah.
I was Will Ferrell from Saturday Night Live. So, but
that's
anyways,
good.
we'll keep going. And so, yeah, it was love at first sight for me. Not so much for Anna. I had to convince her over a period of year and a half, and
I'm seeing a pattern here.
yeah, I was very committed, and I knew what I wanted and pursued her. So, yeah, we got graduated in December 2016. We dated our last year of college, and we got engaged in March of 2017 at where we had our first date, which was on campus at Mississippi State. So it was really cool. And then we got married in December of the same year, so 2017. So, yeah, been a fun journey.
Perfect. Thanks.
All right, so we met actually in an ICC small group in fall of
More
2018.
hope.
I know,
More
there is hope.
is being given.
There is hope. But yeah, we met in 2018, the fall. We just enjoyed each other's company as acquaintances. We weren't even really close friends for about 6 months or so. And then we ended up co-leading a small group one night because our leaders were out of town or something. And so through that process, we kind of got to know each other a little bit better. And then slowly things kind of shifted. We went to dinner one night together. I thought she was dating someone, so I thought it was safe to go like on a one-on-one dinner. Because at the time I was trying not to like date or be around people one-on-one. But I thought she was dating someone, so it was safe. And then I found out on that dinner she wasn't dating anyone. And then we were both like, what's going on here? So it turned out to be something great. We started going on dates in the summer of 2019, started officially dating, I guess, around fall of 19, and then we got married in March of 2020 during a COVID pandemic. We had 4 people at our wedding. It was great. Really sweet.
Including you two.
Yes, including
Yeah,
us.
yeah,
So,
okay. So really 2 people.
yeah, I guess
Yeah,
2
okay.
guests. 2 guests and a photographer. But yeah, so we've been married about 7 months. From dating, or like officially dating, to marriage was 10 months. So, anything you want to add? Great.
Great job, guys. Okay, so kind of adding to that, does anybody have like a funny, awkward story from while you were dating? I already know the answer, but I'm asking if you're willing to share. Is anyone willing to share a funny, awkward story from dating, just to make us laugh?
I can go.
Okay, perfect.
For like the first 30 minutes of our date, it was absolutely awkward. Partially, I think, because we were going from like friendship to dating, but Carrie was absolutely kind of disinterested at first, looking out the window, not really talking, one-word answers.
Y'all were in an Uber.
We were in an Uber,
Right,
that's true.
yeah.
And it is kind of awkward. I'll give you that. But I was like texting people trying to like make plans for later because I thought the date was going to be really short. And then so we went to a 901 FC soccer game, and we would be like having serious conversation. And Carrie is a really big soccer fan. She played college soccer and great athlete. But we'd be in the middle of a serious conversation, and she'd like jump up and start yelling at the people on the field. It was just really awkward. And but luckily that date we kind of rallied and ended up having a good rest of the date. But the first like hour or so, I think we were both like, okay, this is a terrible idea. Why did we do this? Let's get out of here. But it worked.
Thanks for sharing.
In
yeah.
my defense, it's kind of an awkward transition when you go from being friends and in a
Yes.
small group together to on a date together. So that shift was a little awkward.
Yeah.
And that shift happened in front of another person known as the Uber driver.
Right.
So I felt really awkward.
I bet the Uber driver is shocked that y'all made it.
Probably
You
so.
know,
Probably so.
Yeah, if y'all ever run into him or her,
Yeah.
they'll be shocked. Great story, guys. Thanks. What about y'all?
So the first time I asked Anna out on a date, it was kind of funny. I had fully prepared my transition and my speech and everything for when she rejected me. So I was ready. Like I had it prepared. Like she was just gonna like politely say like no, and I was like, oh, okay, cool, like whatever, like.
Yeah, I didn't want you to say yes
whatever,
anyway. Yeah.
So I had that whole thing prepared. What I didn't have prepared was if she said yes. And so she said yes, and I'll let you. How long did I stand there? Like,
He first of all was like, "Hey, so you want to like go to lunch or something this week?" And I was like, "Sure." And he goes, "Oh, okay. It'll probably be like Thursday, but I'm gonna text you with some details." I was like, "Okay, cool. See you Thursday. Hope they're good details." Yeah, he was like totally shocked. He was literally like, "Oh, okay," and then you could tell he was like trying to figure out something.
That's
Worked
really
out.
funny. I love that. Thanks. What do y'all got? Y'all definitely have something in store for us. Plenty. You're trying to choose which one.
So since TJ already outed me that I said I hated him, he just made a very bad first impression. We were in like a community setting together for a year, and he just wasn't my favorite person. Hate's a strong word. But we had gotten to know each other in smaller group settings by the time, and he'd asked me on a date and whatever. So our third date, if you hadn't noticed, we like the Rotors, we just kind of sped through things just the way we worked. But was a 7-hour car ride to Dallas for a wedding. And it was on this car ride that I was like, well, I had been feeling like kind of guilty that he didn't know that I didn't like him. It just was like a weird integrity thing for me. Like, he should know how I really felt about him. And so I was like, hey, I have something to tell you. And he was like, okay. And I was like, I used to really hate you. And he was like, you did? And I was like, yeah, and here's why. And like went through my reasons. And he was like, but what about this interaction? Or what about
Had
this
like a
time?
written list. You're like, yeah. So
Oh,
the first
and he would be
one.
like, but wait, I thought this time we interacted. I was like, no, actually, you were really rude to me that time. And he was like, oh. And he was like, so then it just kind of got quiet. And he was like, but you like me now. I was like, yes, I do like you now. He was like, okay, good, because we've got like 6.5 more hours. This was like 30 minutes into the drive. So that was, but we, coasted through that, and clearly, here we are.
That's great. So funny. Thank y'all for sharing some lighthearted things before we, dive into the deep stuff. Okay, so here's what I want to start some conversation around this question of, I think what's very relevant for a lot of us, if you're not married yet, you're thinking about this. How did you know, like, exactly what you were looking for in a spouse? Okay, so as you were meeting people, making friends in community settings, whatever, okay, as you were looking, as you were open to meeting someone, how did you know what you were looking for, and what were those things, if you're willing to share? Matt, would you start? Thanks.
Yeah, I think it can get real quick. You can start. I mean, there's things that are important, right? Like, you need to be able to like hold a conversation, like have some similar interests and things. Like, I mean, if you're just like don't even want to like talk to the person, sure. But honestly, and this may not be the same for everybody else, so I'd be anxious to hear what you guys have to say. But I mean, it's one thing to say, like, from a church perspective, that we're like looking for this godly girl, or this girl for me. There's some girls out there, and God for you. But like, what does that mean? And I think it's really important to like define that as you're on that pursuit. And so to me, what that looks like is like, where, like, do I see like fruit of the Spirit? Like, is the Spirit of God like a part of this person? And so, yes, it's like, so sometimes you can hear like, oh, like, she's a good girl. She's a good girl. There's a lot of like good girls, but is she pursuing Jesus? Like, do I see love, joy, peace, patience, do I see self-control? Like, do I see these things that's gonna matter? It's not necessarily like, yeah, she's a good girl, like she goes to church on Sundays, and I don't know, she sings in the church choir or something. Like, there's like things like that, but then also there's like, I see fruit of the Spirit in her, which should be really attractive to a Christ follower. So,
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing. Anybody else? Here's sort of you sort of brought up two different things, Matt. One is a sort of a personality compatibility, and then another is kind of a spiritual compatibility, like being able to connect and see things that you admire on both those levels. Do y'all want to speak to either or both of those?
Sure, I can talk briefly. So I had kind of in my mind some character issues that I was looking for. Obviously, you're looking for attraction, and like Matthew was talking about, being able to have conversations, similar interests, things like that. But one thing that was important to me was someone who I could see them interact in community. One thing that I really loved about Carrie when I was getting to know her is no one ever really said anything average about Carrie. And no one knew that I was thinking about pursuing her, but I'd like talk to someone in our small group, unrelated to my pursuit of her, about her. And no one would ever say, like, oh, Carrie, she's okay. She's cool, whatever. Everyone was like, oh, Carrie's amazing. Carrie called me the other day to pray for me about my test that I was having. Or Carrie, came over to my house to help me prepare for something. They were all, like, really wonderful comments. And I think there's something really beautiful about seeing who a person is in the community that they're in. Because so much of our dating happens in isolation, whether that's online or whether that's, dating someone that you don't really know, their family or their community. And not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but I do think being able to see someone in that community was important for me to kind of identify someone that I wanted to pursue.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, I can piggyback off that too. Just even, I think being like out of college too, it was like it's really easy to like put marriage in this like capsule and it's this isolated thing of like, oh, what will they be like in relationship? But how someone's living their life before marriage is really telling of like the spouse they'll be. And we're all on growth processes and have ways that we need to kind of mature and grow up. But kind of like looking at TJ's life apart from me and not like just looking at like how attractive he was or funny he was or these things, like they can almost kind of get siloed into this, like this is this person that could be like marriage material, but kind of lose the big picture of like context of, yeah, family and like what their life looks like in community and church involvement and just kind of a big picture of not just like honing in on like this is a dating partner, because I think that's easy to do.
Yeah, I think a lot of what I've seen people wrestle with, and I wrestled with a lot in college, was this idea of there's this spiritual resume that they have to meet, right? Like they have to, be a disciple maker and discipling girls and have a heart for the nation, like all of this like long, like a spiritual resume, honestly. And then I would hold it up against somebody and I would be like, well, like they don't meet that, or they do, should I be attracted to them? And that was very confusing because it was like, no, just because, they're a godly person and they're living their life with godliness and loving and following Jesus doesn't mean you have to be attracted to them. So that was very confusing. And then I'll say on the other side, one of the things that was very attractive for me about Rachel is she wasn't necessarily like waiting on a man to come and like start her life or complete her life. She was living her life happily, single, and was loving the Lord and loving those around her and caring for people well. And honestly, like working in a job that she loved and was, well, and she was doing everything in her life as a single person and was perfectly okay with that. And that was really attractive for me because I know that I'm going to mess up a lot of things. And so someone just waiting on me to come around to like start their life is like really scary because like I'm like not enough. So that's something that I thought was like very attractive about Rachel and in a spouse, is somebody that's living kind of, as we've said, living their life now, pursuing the Lord, and not necessarily just like waiting on somebody else to come around.
Yeah, I love that. I think kind of speaking to like a contentment sort of in your life, not looking for something that's going to give you joy. Not that a marriage or dating can't add joy to your life, but not looking for something so that I can have joy or so that I can be content or so that I can be a whole person. I think it's really important for seeing in seasons of singleness to like remember that like I'm not a half person because I'm not married yet, right? God wants me to be a healthy whole person now. I think that's really important. Were you guys going to add to that? I saw some mics start going up.
Yeah. Just to add on to like exactly what just been said. Like I think, a lot of our answers have centered around like what we were looking for, but like what TJ was hitting on is how you do that is to be like you're in tune with the Spirit, like individually. Like I am worshiping and loving life with God, and like the Spirit being in tune with Him in my life. That's how I know like what I'm looking for. Does that make sense? Because if we just follow our flesh, like it's dangerous. I think everybody knows that.
Yeah,
I love that.
Absolutely.
And I also think too, talking about the how, like you were touching on, it's okay to desire relationship, and it's okay to like study about it. I used to read books. Maybe I'm outing myself kind of as a nerd here, but I would read much as books about dating. I would read books about relationship. There's some great ones out there, Sacred Search by Gary Thomas and Single Dating, Engaged, Married by Ben Stewart. There's a lot of really good resources, podcasts. So it's okay to like search for relationship. And the Bible even talks about, specifically talking about the Proverbs 31 woman, that the man like sought her out. And I think it's okay to seek those things and to prepare your heart and to pray for those things. Like I feel to some extent in our culture, it's almost like you don't want to act like you really want to be in a relationship. It's like not cool to act that way. I don't think you should make it your idol to be in a relationship, but I also think it's okay to be open to that and receptive to that and seek that out.
That's great. Yeah, thank you guys for for sharing. Something I'm wondering is, so you guys already kind of shared your stories briefly about your time spent dating and kind of your journey. Something I'm wondering is, okay, so we've talked about kind of what we're looking for in dating, and we'll come back to sort of that dating journey a little bit. But something I'm wondering, kind of moving even further, is was there a moment, or were there certain things that happened, or certain things you saw that kind of moved you beyond dating to say, you're the person I want to marry, and I'm going to? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Can you all help
yeah,
speak to
I
that
can,
a little
I
bit?
can start. So not ours. Mine, that moment for me was on our first date. And I hate cliches. I am not that person. I was always that single
It was
person.
when she told you she hated you.
Yeah,
You're
that was
like,
it.
"You're the
I
one."
really was
Yeah.
like, hey, wait, there's something here. No, I was always the person that was like, people were like, oh, well, you know. And I was like, I hate you. And that was never me. And then here I am on our first date, and she's talking about her life and her dreams, and how she wants to be a counselor, and she's going back to school. And just knowing her and knowing how well she cared for her friends and the people around her. What's the book? Meaning of Marriage by Tim Keller. He says, rough quote, but he says, seeing that something and a person that you want to be a part of the work that God's doing in their life from now until heaven, so then in heaven, you can stand with God in them and see the glorification of who they are and say, that's who I saw. And that's why, like, I want to be with you for the rest of my life, is to journey alongside what God is doing in your life. I just want to help and be a part of that as in any way that I can. And that was that moment for me, was hearing her talk about what she feels like the Lord has called her to, and who she was. Like I said, in the moment, it was like, I just want to be a part of wherever the Lord takes you and whatever the Lord is going to do in your life. Because you are so beautiful, and I see like your heart, and I just want to be there. I want to be with you. So
That's a really good answer. Yeah, great answer. Thanks, TJ. Anybody else want to share kind of from that experience?
Yeah, we kind of touched on this earlier, but I kind of got to see Micah in like a community setting for 6 to 8 months first. And that was really helpful. I got to see his character and the way that he loved on people, and that was a time when we really weren't even interested in one another. So that gave me an idea of the person that he was, even before there was any sort of date or interest. So that was fun. And then whenever we kind of had an initial conversation, I was able to see more of his heart. And I remember walking away from that time being like, Micah is a really beautiful person. Like, I just remember thinking that, which I never walk away. Like, I don't know. I just don't walk away from a conversation with a male thinking, he's such a beautiful human, And so
It's the hair.
It's
Yeah.
the hair,
Yeah.
for sure. And so I remember being really intrigued and almost like surprised that I was attracted to him. But it was definitely like attracted to who he was, obviously his physical appearance as well, but who he was, and the way that he loved on people. And just I got to see his heart before I was really attracted to him first. So another thing I think that made an impact on me in our dating relationship was just Micah's ability to communicate with me. I was never left to wonder. It wasn't like an anxiety-producing process. So that played a huge part in dating. Like I was never afraid to ask, like, where are we? What's going on? And so that was something that I think made a huge impact in our dating relationship. Something I was looking for. It wasn't a male that was trying to play games with me, or he was just really genuine and honest in where he was emotionally. So that played a huge role. I don't know.
That's great. Thanks for sharing. What about this couch? You got anything?
Yeah. So mine is a little bit of a different twist, I think. And I know we kind of talked to Mitchell about this recently. So I Matthew pursued me in the most patient, gracious way I have ever seen in my life of anyone pursuing anyone else. He pursued me in a way that was so gentle, very patient, very loving and compassionate, and I will never stop being amazed by that. I had a ton of walls up, so really, really guarded, tons of walls up, very hard to pursue and hard to love, I think, because I was not wanting to let anyone in. Not wanting to let, not just Matthew, but just a male in general, not wanting to let anyone penetrate this brick wall that I had built. So for me, it took me a while, like even as we were dating, in a relationship, boyfriend and girlfriend, I still had a lot of walls up, a lot of insecurities, a perfectionist to a fault. I wanted to know all the answers on the front end, like, am I going to marry him? Like, is this right? Blah, blah. Like, I wanted to know all the answers before going through the process of, like, getting to know him, learning who he was as a person, deeper than just friendship, but, like, learning his heart, learning what his priorities and passions and the things that the Lord had laid on his heart for his life were. So it's like I wanted to know all the answers before going through the process of dating. Like, you date and get to know someone for a reason. You don't have all those answers on the front end. That's why you go through the process. So I was like way too much of a perfectionist, just so worried, like, what if this isn't the guy that I'm supposed to marry? Or what if I make the wrong decision or like let him in and share my heart with him, but he's not the one I end up marrying? I was so scared. And I had multiple like mentors and really, really sweet friends who just like prayed with me and walked with me and counseled me, gave me some tough love and kind of told me like nicely, like, you're being an idiot sometimes, because I was. But they were so gentle in walking through that with me. But for me, like, a turning point of knowing, like, or going from dating to knowing, like, I really want to marry Matthew was more of me dealing with my heart issues and my, like, perfectionism issues with the Lord. So it was a lot of, like, me seeing my own sin and my own, like, struggles and insecurities and taking that before the cross, letting the Lord, like, completely wash over me, purify my heart, purify my mind, and help me in my weakness. And then as the scales were, like, peeled off my eyes, then I could see, like, holy cow, for a year and a half, Matthew has been pursuing me, loving me, going out of his way to serve me in, like, crazy intentional ways. And there is nothing, no red flag telling me that this isn't right. Like, the Lord is not trying to confuse me. He's not trying to lead me astray. There's, like, nothing telling me that this isn't purely from the Lord. And at that point, like, my heart changing and me finally being able to see clearly, I was like, dang, like, Matthew is literally like no one I've ever known in my life. And I don't want to, like, why look for anyone else? Because he's right here.
I think that just brings up a great point, because Anna, the roles have been reversed, like in our marriage in some things, like just in certain seasons that we've gone through. And seriously, like, I think the thing that we need to communicate, and this is the thing that I learned, was that God and Anna in that moment was not on my schedule. Like, and that's that's good. Like, it was good for me to, like, calm down and be patient, like, because true, like, sanctification was happening, and that's not, like, that is selfish if the faster person, like, if you're usually there's a slower and a faster person, and it's male or female. It's selfish on the faster person to speed that process up, because you're losing the sight of the purpose of what a relationship's all about. Like, we're being sanctified to look more and more like Jesus. That's literally what you're doing in dating. That's literally what you're going to do when you put the ring on the finger and you make your commitments and your vows into marriage. Like, until the day where you die together. Like, you're going to be being sanctified, and to be on, like, God's schedule and not your schedule is really important, I think. Even, seriously, moving forward in our marriage, like 50 years from now, we're going to remember that. And, hopefully we're faithful and obedient.
Thank you guys for sharing. That's really, really good. I, I wanted to kind of talk a little bit more about dating, and then we'll kind of finish with talking about more about marriage. I know this has mostly been about dating. I do want to kind of ask, maybe as we sort of wrap that up, Anna, I really appreciate what you shared, kind of out of your own weakness. Kind of, this was sort of something that was just messed up in me that I brought in, kind of some baggage I brought in, and this is how it fleshed out. I kind of just along those lines, I wanted to ask if anybody would be willing to share, hey, this is a struggle we had. These are some mistakes we made. This is what I really kind of wish in hindsight we would have done differently, or I would have done differently, or hey, if I could tell you guys, if you're single or dating, this is what I would tell you. Watch out for this, or don't do what I did. Does that make sense? Is there anything else like that y'all could share out of your own experiences and even your own failures that would kind of maybe be beneficial for somebody else?
I think for me, one thing that I wrestled with was kind of speaking to what Anna said too, just really like trusting the process, and that I'm kind of more on the belief in that you could marry several different people. Like, I think I'm really much more so that love is a choice. I think that's really modeled in scripture, that like Christ chose to bind himself to me, knowing all the ways I would leave him, be unfaithful, sin against him, and he still sticks with me. And I think that the marriage being that picture is why it's so beautiful, is that like we get to choose to stick with someone in like that process and know that we're going to hurt each other. And so kind of learning to be okay in that it's messy, that even when it's the right person, there were things that were really hard, or you're looking at things that are really incomplete about a person, of like, this isn't my favorite quality about you, or like, this is bringing out something really ugly in me. And that's not necessarily red flags, but some of that it is just human, and kind of differentiating between like, not wanting to plow past things that are huge character flaws, or like where there's foundational things, but the messiness of it is always going to be there. And that not being, I think it's easy to have like a standard of dating in your mind of like, this is how the relationship will go, or this is how I'll be in it, and this is how I want them to be in it, and kind of just releasing that, and it being like, well, I think more of the question for me was kind of like, is TJ's baggage and his mess something that I want to carry with him and feel called to? And more so wasn't a desire, but even from a kind of what Anna, like, it was kind of a surrender moment for me of like, I think God's calling me to be in this space, and that actually feels a lot scarier, because it's not perfect, and I'm not perfect in it either. Like, his messiness reveals more of mine. And so I think just really releasing that sense of what it needs to look like, and kind of being okay with the mess, is actually just setting you up for a lot more grace, and even just, I think, intimacy in marriage, because it's just not going to be perfect. And that's really good, actually.
It's really good. Thanks for sharing that, Rachel.
Yeah, I could share. So when we were just kind of starting to date, I was bringing in some baggage, I think, emotionally from prior relationships. And so this doesn't have to do as much with ours, but just in general, I wish someone when I was a younger male in high school or college, would have pulled me aside and told me about emotional intimacy and how that can bind you to someone. And so I guess what I would suggest, or kind of a tip I would say, male or female, is first and foremost, make sure that you know what you want out of your dating relationship. Dating isn't a status or something to just stay in. Dating is a process. Like, there's an end goal. You shouldn't date just to date because it's a status or you get special privileges with somebody to take to Christmas or something like that. You need to be really intentional in why you're dating. And that includes like things as a male. Sometimes what I would do is I would get emotionally intimate with a woman who I was kind of interested in, but wasn't interested in enough to commit to a dating relationship. And I would kind of grow her emotional intimacy and mine, and we would kind of get to really share our hearts and things like that. But I wasn't prepared to commit. I wasn't prepared to step up and offer her things that I didn't offer as a single person. And so I guess my encouragement to everyone, but specifically to men, as you're starting to pursue and as you're starting to date, is like, don't try to find someone, a female, just to hang out with. Don't try to find someone that you just are getting your emotional needs met from. because that breeds that emotional intimacy, and that's an unhealthy thing to do. And it's not a kind thing to do. So if you don't know that you want to pursue that person, like don't text them asking them how their heart is. Don't send them flowers on their birthday if you're not sure that you want to pursue them, because it gets to be really uncomfortable and really awkward when you have to have those conversations of where are we, and you can't answer that because you don't know. You just think they're cool and like to hang out with them. So just be really careful about breeding that emotional intimacy, male or female. And also, if someone is kind of pursuing you, or someone is reaching out to you or treating you differently maybe than they're treating other members of the opposite sex, like it is okay for you to ask, hey, what are your intentions? It is okay to say, hey, well, you're doing this, you're sending me cookies or flowers, or you're calling me and wanting to hang out one-on-one, but you're not doing this with other people. Like, what are your intentions with those actions? That's perfectly okay. Do not be afraid to do that, because you're either going to help them understand what they're doing and how it's affecting you, or you're going to invite them into a conversation of pursuit. And I just think that's something I wish someone had told me when I was younger, because it would have saved a lot of heartache, both on my end and the young ladies that I was hanging out with at the time.
That's great. Yeah, thank you guys. So, yeah, kind of getting on a conversation about boundaries there, and you, Rachel, you kind of shared about sort of embracing the mess sometimes and trusting the process. You know, what else can you guys want to speak to anything? You don't have to, but
Yeah, I think Anna already really shared kind of from your heart what you would do different. I mean, I'll be short and quick. Like, I think it's easy to be, and maybe it's maybe more so for males, but like you're pursuing this girl like so much, and like you're just like desperately in prayer. My story was, while I was in the pursuit, like I was just like praying all the time, like for Anna, like for myself, like honestly, some of the most intimate, just good prayer time that I've experienced in my life was in that time of like patience and like just pursuing her God with godliness. But I think it's easy to like once we started dating, and then like once she was like fully committed, and like once she was engaged, it was almost like let off the gas. I think it's easy to kind of get complacent when everything's going well type thing mentality, and we desperately need God like throughout the whole process. And even like now into marriage, I'm like, oh wow, like daily we need to be like desperately depending on God in prayer. So just encourage you to keep doing that.
thank
And
you guys.
I do think, like, in that moment when you start to be more complacent or less, like, desperately dependent on the Lord, less, like, completely Him focused in your relationship, obviously that's when more, like, temptations start creeping in, whether it's physical or just, like, having fun together is awesome. Please have fun together. But if it's just, like, hanging out all the time just to have fun with no depth and no, like, growth and getting to know each other and having, like, being careful of emotional boundaries, but still having, like, good conversations and real conversations. When your eyes start shifting away from actual purpose and the goal of really just Jesus and knowing Him more, and demonstrating Christ's love for the church in a marriage, when your eyes start shifting from that, it's so much easier to drift into more of just like, we just hang out and have fun, but there's no depth, or start tiptoeing the boundaries, or just like stop being even intentional with other people and like what you do together, like serving other people, inviting other people in, being intentional with conversations with others, like all the things that really matter start to kind of drift aside pretty easily when you become complacent.
Yeah, I think there's definitely, TJ, were you going to share something along those lines?
No, something different.
Okay, yeah. Keep that in mind. I wanted to just open up any more. We've hit on this a couple of times. Just this, we're talking about boundaries. So different kinds of boundaries. So I think a lot of us probably think of physical boundaries. That's probably the first thing that comes to our minds. But we're also talking about emotional. Micah and Maggie, I mentioned that. Even spiritual boundaries. Did y'all want to share a little bit about that? Kind of how you learned that? Maybe either success or failure in that. Anything you guys want to share about that? Carrie's handing the mic to Mike. There's a lot of handing going on. Yeah. A lot of volunteering
Okay,
happening.
I'll go.
Yeah.
I think something we heard early on in marriage, but applies to dating, is oneness is not sameness, and that that if dating has a purpose towards marriage, like there is a healthy natural growth of your lives becoming more and more together and aligning, and that's appropriate. Like that those things kind of stair step that way if marriage is where you're headed, but that it is supposed to be with the intent of marriage. But that I think it's just kind of really easy, and even in marriage, to feel like, oh, we have to be the same to be like a team, and that just where I think emotional boundaries come in, and spiritual and physical, is like that you're your own person the entire time you're dating, and then moving into marriage, that like the gift of marriage is you bring two full people together that have different experiences of God and different personalities and different giftings and strengths and weaknesses, and that makes up the beauty of your marriage. And so with like emotional boundaries and things too, it's very just easy to kind of like blend together and not push into disagreements. And again, not saying there's major compatibility issues or anything, but kind of like you're allowed to feel how I have an emotional experience and TJ has one, and they can be different, and we can still move forward, and that isn't necessarily divisive. And just kind of learning how to like hold your own emotions, hold your own spiritual life too, of like we're not supposed to give up all parts of ourselves. We're supposed to like sacrifice the things that I think that we hold on to as just ours for the sake of like marriage. But it's meant to be like a blending of two whole people. And so if you're not kind of doing your own work in your own person before, it kind of creates this like sense of just enmeshment, I think, in dating that just will continue into marriage. I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks for sharing that. Anybody else kind of on that boundaries topic, how to maintain healthy boundaries?
I'll speak to the spiritual side, which is honestly hard. I feel like there's a thin line there. But, I would say like I would just want to voice that there's danger in, especially just kind of speaking to the guys, there's danger in how we can kind of view dating. But just like I've seen some relationships get to a point where like people have dated for a while, but they are not married. And like they are not married, and the guy can be very controlling spiritually and honestly like manipulative, like, and if you see like signs of that or any red flags like pop up, it's just dangerous. And like there's no, I don't know, guys can perceive it in the wrong way. And the whole scripture, and this is where I want to tiptoe, like I want to be super gentle here, but like the whole scripture of, we can all study Ephesians 5, and like wives like submit, and husbands like lead, and that can just like easily be misconstrued, especially in dating. So just want to like, there's danger there, just be careful.
Yeah, thanks.
The other day, Matthew said something that I think was really important to help kind of sum up that as a woman, like in a dating relationship, Matthew the other day was like, a girl should see spiritual leadership qualities in the guy she's dating, but he is not her spiritual leader in a dating relationship. In marriage, 100%, he has the God-given role, which is beautiful, of being a spiritual leader. And I look to him as a spiritual leader. Not that I'm lesser, but I do look to him as a leader. He has a personal relationship with the Lord. I have a personal relationship with the Lord. And then, kind of like you're saying, our two whole spiritual relationships with the Lord get to come together in a oneness in marriage. And he has a beautiful role of being a godly spiritual leader in our marriage. But in dating relationship, he was not my spiritual leader and should not have been, although I was seeing displays of spiritual leadership qualities. So just kind of what you're saying to the guys, like, just know you are not her spiritual leader yet until you're in a covenant relationship.
That's great. Micah?
Yeah, I was just going to follow up on that. I think those are great points that you guys brought up. And one delineation I want to make is, in the Bible, there's no like dating status, right? And so the thing that we can glean from that is that if I'm a male trying to date a woman, she's my sister in Christ or she's my wife. there's no middle ground. And so, you don't get to date and you get extra physical privileges. You don't get to date and get extra emotional privileges. Like, she is my sister in Christ or my wife. And until she becomes my wife, then she is my sister in Christ only. And so that kind of goes towards the spiritual boundaries and the health. And when you realize that it's just a sister in Christ, that's going to motivate you to follow those boundaries of physical boundaries, emotional boundaries, things like that. And then kind of on the note of boundary, really quickly, one thing I want to say is you can date healthily and the relationship end and it be okay. Like, you don't have to have a great relationship that always ends in marriage. One thing that Carrie and I talked a lot about when we were dating was this concept of hurt versus harm. In any relationship, you're going to take a little bit of a risk, and you might get hurt. The relationship might end. Most relationships end. That's okay. Like, you can date healthily, end a relationship, and experience hurt, but the goal in a healthy Christian dating relationship should be to be able to do that and not harm one another through violating physical boundaries, through violating emotional boundaries. So kind of keep in mind when you're thinking about boundaries is like the whole hurt versus harm dichotomy. And you can do everything right and still hurt, and don't be afraid of that, because that's just life. That's taking risks. But really trying to operate in protecting each other's boundaries and not harming one another, I think is something to really keep in mind on the boundaries perspective.
That's really good. Thanks, Micah. TJ, would
I was just going to say, this is going to be very extreme. I'll paint the picture now. One thing that I had read somewhere, and it really just struck home with me on this exact topic of kind of ownership in dating and talking about, spiritual leadership and then boundaries. And what Micah shared, you have, sister in Christ and you have your wife. Those are like the two extremes for us, which was very hard and very confusing for the rest of the world. We didn't use the terms boyfriend and girlfriend. So that was something that I cared about and I shared with Rachel, and she was okay with going along with. But that just helped me a lot to try and remember the fact that Rachel is not my girlfriend. In this is it for me. I was I would get caught up in that ownership piece of this is my girlfriend, right? This mine,
like a possession,
mine possessive, right? And that I really thought about that a lot. And so for our entire 6 months that we dated, I said, "This is Rachel. We're dating." And everyone said, "Oh, okay. So are you just started dating?" I was like, "Oh no, we've been dating for about 5 months." And they would be like, "Oh, okay. So is she your girlfriend?" And I was like, "No, we're dating." And it was very confusing, and I spent so much time explaining to people. And was it worth the hassle? I don't know. It was not for them. It was for me. So that was something that, something small. And if you're dating someone or you're single, that's something to think about is what's something that would help me remember that in dating? And it doesn't have to be that. I'm saying that was extreme, right? Sure. But thinking along those lines of, hey, how can I remember that when things are going really well and we're having so much fun that, we're still on a purpose. Our purpose is to move toward marriage and not lose sight of that, and then also not jump ahead and try and skip to get the benefits of marriage now. So
that's really good. Thanks, TJ.
We didn't do that, but I love that heart. So I am
yeah.
I'm all for that. That's awesome.
I was just going to piggyback too and say we did that too because I think it's really not just there was no possessiveness over me as a person, but just the way we cling to relationship, I think, easily, and not making it an idol of the other person, and you should always feel like you have the option to leave. You are not committed to someone in dating. You are in a process to figure that out, and even in engagement, you have the option to leave. We no longer have the option to leave in marriage, and so even that kind of codependency of I have to stay for this person or they have to stay for me. I think when we take too much ownership and responsibility for someone else's well-being, or we talked about the guys, but even girls, it's not up to him to help my emotions be regulated or lead me spiritually or make me feel secure. That's something I have to work on in myself. And so even just was that sense of hey, we have the option to leave, and we're continually choosing to stay. And that actually builds much more trust than if you feel like you have to stay.
Yeah,
And I think just sets a much better foundation for marriage in general.
that's great. Thanks, Rachel. Micah, did you have something to?
Yeah, just
share?
really
Yes.
briefly, a funny story. When I was younger, my grandmother would be so confused about the concept of dating because when she was going through that process, they had what they called going steady, but you basically dated whoever asked you to go out on a date until you got engaged. We'd have this weird pseudo engagement of an exclusive relationship that's kind of formed. But she would just she thought it was so silly because she could go out with anybody who she wanted to go out with until someone committed to like giving her the ring and becoming engaged. And I honestly think that's a really wise thing to do and a wise way to go about it that just saves you a lot of those issues when it comes to ownership and boundaries and possessiveness. So I really loved that point, TJ.
Thank you, guys. Or go ahead.
Yeah, I do. Last thought is
Yeah.
like I think it just drives home that, like Rach said earlier, which I'm sure everyone on this stage agrees. Love is a choice, right? So in dating, you as the male continue to choose to pursue the woman out of love or the lesser of that as you get to know them. And you as the woman have the choice to say, yes, I would like to continue to go on a date with you or to date you in the process of that this is leading towards marriage, or we're trying to understand and gain clarity if we should be married, right? So that option right there of choosing, right? Because even in marriage, you're still choosing the other person. So in dating, it doesn't change other than the covenant that you can now have together, is that there is no separation, there's no leaving, but that choice of you still have to choose, I still have to choose to pursue Rachel and to choose to love her regardless of my emotions, regardless of what's happening in the world. And she also still has to choose to love me, right? So that's that like give and take that starts in dating in obviously the lesser sense as you continue to go through the process, and then it still continues into marriage.
Last one, promise. But we are not like, we did not fall in love like that. Because that just like implies that like, you may have read that in some cheesy book, but I don't care. You did not fall in love. That implies you can like fall out in one day. Like I made it. Right. Like in marriage, like I am choosing to commit. Like there's no falling in and out of that. Like I am committing to you. I am choosing to love you. And there's a difference.
Thank y'all. I feel like that's really important. I want to be sensitive to y'all's time for the ones who are here. I know some of you are in the middle of busy weeks. If you need to go, that's okay. But I do want to wrap up, kind of moving us towards kind of ending with marriage, and maybe just focusing on really just kind of one big question, like what has marriage taught you about yourself, about what it means to love someone, about what it means to be loved, about God, about the gospel. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what is it, if you could say, a few of you at least could share just what is the most important thing that marriage has taught you that maybe you didn't know before? Does that make sense? Yeah. What has marriage taught you? What you got, Carrie? We haven't
Okay.
heard from you a whole lot.
Yeah.
You're a good listener.
So I would say one of the big things initially, which we've only been married for 7 months, so, but I saw that my ish that was going on before marriage,
Don't worry, we'll edit that later.
Thanks.
That's okay, yeah.
my stuff, my issues were still present in marriage. Like it's still there. And so I am a very performance-driven person in my relationship with my family, in my relationship with the Lord. So why would I not be that way with Micah? And so I felt like initially, and I still struggle with this, like I have to perform. I have to be a wife of, a certain type of wife. I have to do things in order to be loved and to be cared for. And right off the bat, Micah said, like, I have made my choice. You are my wife. I have chosen you regardless of whether you do the laundry or regardless of, the choices that you make. today. And so that is just such a beautiful picture of the gospel. Like immediately I'm seeing like just how Christ sees me. It doesn't matter like what I do or what I could offer up to Christ. Like he has chosen me as his child. And so I think that I saw that immediately. And I still struggle with that. But yeah, I think that is just a really beautiful picture of the gospel and how marriage is supposed to mirror that. And that's been like a hard lesson because I want to gain Micah's love. I want to gain Christ's love. I want it to be on my own accord and what I could do and what I could possibly offer. But it really has nothing to do with me, but what Micah has chosen and what Christ has chosen, you know, what he's done for me. So
That's awesome. Yeah, thanks so much. It's really amazing.
Yeah, mine's kind of similar to what Carrie shared. And this kind of started in dating. Is Rachel sat down with me after a date one time, and we went to dinner or something, and I was just emotionally just kind of a wreck. Not like crying or anything, but like I was not there. Like, and we sat down and she had a conversation with me about how the way I was living my life without limits, without healthy time to like take care of myself and to work on myself, is very dangerous, not only for myself, but for anybody that you're trying to be in a relationship with. If they want to enter into life with you, they're at risk of all of that, right? And so Rachel, early on, like I said, sat me down and said, hey, like, I like want to move forward with you. I just need you to know that like I will not be able to move forward if you cannot take care of yourself, because who you are now is who you will be in marriage, right? So as Carrie was sharing the issues and the things that you're facing now personally, you bring those into marriage. They don't just magically change. If you're wrestling with addiction, with busyness, with a season of depression or anything, all of those things come with you into marriage. And so work on what you can now, right? That was the biggest thing for me is, like Micah, I read a ton of books on dating, and I love the concept. I love the concept of Christian dating because it's so gray and not outlined clearly in the Bible for us. I had done a lot of work on that end and had not done a lot of work personally for me emotionally, and how I was constantly consumed with busyness and fun and the pursuit of those types of things to where I was running nonstop and who I was would just crash, right? And so as you invite somebody else into your life to go on that journey with you, in marriage, right, it's no longer just me. It's not just me, it's Rachel. And so if I'm not taking care of myself spiritually, emotionally, physically, mentally, all of those pieces, that is what is also affecting my marriage in some way or another. So that's something that I think that marriage has taught me the most, is that like Carrie said, the Lord also cares about you. And who you are, like not just who you're associated with in relationship. And so know that like the Lord cares about you and wants you to work on you to be sanctified and to be who he has called you to be. Whether that is somebody who is married or somebody who is not married, that does not change, right? And so working on yourself and all those aspects are so important to do now in singleness, continue to do in dating, because they all impact and come with you into marriage.
That's so good. Thanks, TJ. Anybody else? Anna?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things ever about marriage, and also one of the things that I've learned but just kind of experienced, like I knew it going into marriage, but just experiencing it now is really beautiful. But truly like the complete oneness with a person. When you like enter into this covenant relationship, so I don't even know how to explain it, but just like truly the oneness that you have with the other person, understanding like when he comes home from work, some days I know he needs to talk. Some days I know I just need to shut up and let him process. But like you truly know that person better than anyone else in the entire world, and they know you better than anyone. But other than just like, aside from just like knowing each other, just the way that the Lord totally, the Holy Spirit totally like fills you with like intercession for the other person, like laying your spouse on your heart in certain times of the day, or waking you up in the middle of the night, like telling you something specifically, like, hey, Matt, pray for Matthew in this. Or like sometimes Matthew's in grad school right now, also working full time, so he's up late a lot studying or working, like doing homework. So there have been a lot of times lately where I go to bed before him, and countless times I've fallen asleep just praying for him. And then I'll wake up the next morning and be like, wow, I didn't even know that I fell asleep. But just the way that the Lord like invades your mind with what the other person needs in their time of weakness, or in their time when they're struggling and are very weak in themselves, or very weak emotionally, or even weak spiritually, but being able to intercede for the other person and knowing that that intercession is from the Holy Spirit. He's like prompting you what to pray. He's prompting you of like what the other person needs. So just that oneness that I've truly not just like know in my head happens, but experienced, is the most beautiful picture of the oneness that we like halfway know now with the Lord, but we'll know so much more fully when he returns and we're with him like in person forever. We have this incredible taste and glimpse now of knowing the Lord and growing in a relationship with him, and knowing that he knows us, but to know that we like just have a glimpse right now, and it's just a taste of how much oneness we will fully experience when he returns is incredible. So I think about like, if I feel like I know Matthew, how much more does Christ know and care for him and pursue him so much? And if I feel known by Matthew, how much more does my Heavenly Father know me? So like experiencing the oneness and the knowing each other on earth is like the tiniest glimpse of the beauty of eternity with the Lord. Not eternity with Matthew, eternity with Jesus. Like that's the goal. That is the reward.
That's amazing. Thank you guys so much. I feel like, so, okay, part of me hates to end this conversation because it's been we could like go for hours, but hey, here's what we're going to do for the sake of our time. I just want to say thank y'all so much for coming. For those watching, thank you so much for tuning in. Can we just thank our panel really quick?